Some knitting patterns ask for $10 and a little blind faith. This one seems determined to earn that $10 first. Hi, my name is Taylor, and today I want to talk about a knitting pattern page that caught my attention. A viewer emailed me recently and pointed me in the direction of the Dogwood cardigan by Andrea Gaughan because of how much detail and support that Andrea had made available prior to purchasing the pattern. The viewer who emailed me was particularly struck by the showcase of test knitters and the fact that you could tell Andrea put in a lot of effort to ensure that knitters had the confidence to start the project prior to spending a dime. And initially, upon receiving the email, I thought that maybe I would take this really awesome pattern page that she shared with me and turn it into a video where I showcase this really awesome pattern page. Just, a genuinely impressive knitting pattern page, the knitwear designer attached to that, and a good example of a knitwear designer putting a lot of information and clarity in front of the knitter before even asking for the sale. But the more I looked at the situation, the more I thought about the pattern page and what it means in that one isolated context, the more interesting the whole notion got, at least in my mind. Eventually, I moved past simply appreciating what was there on the pattern page and started asking myself what exactly it meant. Not just whether it was impressive, because it is, but what kind of value it was offering, what kind of standard it was setting, and whether something like this should change the way that we think about knitting pattern pages more broadly, and whether above and beyond should automatically become the new baseline expectation. And that is when the idea for the video shifted for me and why we have what we have now. So let me explain what caught my attention here. What this page is doing is giving the knitter useful information before purchase. And that is the key. Because what knitters are usually trying to figure out before purchasing a knitting pattern is not terribly mysterious. We're trying to determine whether that sample that you see is doing a lot of heavy lifting. We're trying to figure out if the fit is actually versatile, or whether one very tall and handsome woodland creature just looks really fantastic in it. We're trying to figure out whether or not the pattern is giving us enough information to make an informed choice, or whether we're about to spend money based mostly on vibes and one heroic photo shoot. This page does a much better job than most at removing that guesswork. It gives the knitter more than one polished sample photo and a cheerful nudge into the abyss. There are fit-specific resources. There is a tester showcase. There's more context around how the garment works in practice, and that changes the whole feel of the purchase. The knitter is not just being sold the instructions to make a cardigan. They're given more of the information that they need to determine whether those instructions and the product that they get after following those instructions right for them. That is the part I think is worth paying attention to. Not just more content, more decision-making help. And I think this matters especially because we're talking about a garment pattern. Garments are not low stakes. If a hat goes a little sideways, you can roll your eyes, become mildly frustrated, and move on. If a cardigan goes sideways, that can be a meaningful amount of yarn, a meaningful amount of time, and a meaningful amount of annoyance. So it makes sense that knitters want more reassurance up front. And that is why a knitting pattern page like this feels valuable. And I think that's part of what makes that $10 price tag interesting. Seeing that level of care up front makes that $10 feel far more justified, which raises the bigger question. Is this the new standard? Or is this simply what it looks like when a designer chooses to offer a more robust form of support? And I think the answer is probably both, but not in the same way. Yes, I do think that something like this raises the bar in that it shows knitters what's possible. It shows what it looks like when a knitting pattern page is not just there to display a garment, but to help the buyer make a more informed decision. But raising the bar is not the same as raising the minimum, and that's a distinction that matters as well, because I do not think that every knitwear designer is now obligated to provide multiple fit documents and an entire pre-purchase support system just to show that they're taking their work seriously. That would be unreasonable. Not every designer has the same amount of time, infrastructure, tester support, or even the same business model. And not every pattern requires the same level of pre-purchase handholding either. There is a difference between noticing excellence and turning it into a universal requirement for everybody with a Ravelry page and a dream. So maybe the question is actually not whether or not this has become the new standard. Maybe the real question is whether it should be. Should this now be the thing that I measure other knitting pattern pages against? Should this be what a Ravelry knitting pattern page ought to include before asking someone to pay for a garment pattern? And I think my answer is no. At least not in a straightforward way. Not because this is excessive, not because it's unnecessary, and not because I think that knitters should want less or expect less information. I think this is excellent. I think it's thoughtful, and I think it adds real value, but I do not think that that automatically makes it the new minimum. What this looks like to me is not the baseline. This looks more to me like a very robust pre-purchase premium offering. It looks like a designer choosing to provide more support up front, more clarity up front, and more help with the decision making up front. Seeing something like this done well can sharpen your thinking about what is valuable and what you find value in. If it helps you make better decisions, that support feels worth paying for. And I think there's another distinction worth making here as well, which is that not all support like this shows up in the same place. Some patterns are fairly minimal on the pattern page and then much more detailed when you're inside the purchase document. Others, like Andrea's Dogwood cardigan, seem to put a remarkable amount of support into the buying decision itself before the knitter has spent any money. Those are both forms of value, but they're not the same experience, and they're not solving the same problem. One is helping you decide whether to buy, the other is helping you execute once you already have, and hopefully, on the other side of that, you feel justified in the purchase that you've already made. Even then, more information does not automatically make a better experience for everybody. Some knitters love a highly supportive pattern. Others prefer something more streamlined or bare bones. Some want all the notes, all the context, all the scaffolding, all the possibilities, and all the possible reassurances before they begin. Others would prefer not to be greeted by a wall of helpfulness when all they wanted was the heel turn and a little piece. I'm looking at you. Fish lips kiss heel. So even when one offering is more robust, that does not universally make it better. It just means it's offering a different kind of experience. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized that this is not just a knitting experience. You could say the same thing about recipes, sewing patterns, embroidery guides, or any paid creative instructions. Some are basic, but functional. Some are more polished. Some are much more robust in the amount of clarity and support that they provide. And I think that is what this example helps illustrate. Not that every one offering should become the most robust example imaginable, but that there are really all kinds of levels to this. Knitwear design and knitting patterns that go up on Ravelry are essentially pieces of an open market. Anybody can share a knitting pattern on Ravelry. You're going to have all patterns of all varieties of quality, of all different price points. This just helps you to feel a little bit more discerning about what the value is and means to you. And all the levels along the entire spectrum of quality of product, and in the case of today's video, knitting patterns, are acceptable. The job is really on the part of the discerning knitter to make an informed choice. And I suppose if someone's charging more money for something that helps you make that choice, then that money might be worth it in the long run. So to me, this knitting pattern page, the Dogwood cardigan by Andrea Gaughan, is not just interesting because it proves that everybody else is doing too little. It's interesting because it proves that there's a lot of value in the process of reducing uncertainty before a person has to spend any money. And that's not new. That's not rocket science. We all feel the value in that experience. It shows what it looks like when a designer puts real thought into helping someone make an informed decision, not just admire a beautiful sample and hope for the best. And I think that's worth paying attention to. Not as a rule, not as a mandate, not as a new moral minimum for every designer under the sun, but as a really strong example about what added value can look like in this space. This pattern did not make me think that every designer should now do more. It made me think more carefully about what it means when a designer chooses to. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. This was kind of a ramble, a stream of consciousness script that I put together for this video because my thoughts went all over the place. What I would ask of you now in the comments of this video, if you know of any other knitwear designers who are providing a really robust pre-purchase experience for their knitting patterns, let us know down below so that we can experience what this looks like across designers, because I know Andrea Gaughan can't possibly be the only one out there doing it. Also, if you know of knitwear designers who don't particularly build out a robust pattern pattern page like this, but you have come to trust them and with providing you fantastic knitting experiences once you've made your purchase, share those guys down there as well, because I think it's important that we talk about both, because sometimes that robust experience, as I like to call it, comes pre and post purchase. One does not make the other less valuable. It's just a different kind of value coming at a different time in terms of the transaction. I think it's really interesting. I really enjoyed looking through this pattern. I think it's an interesting conversation to have, so if you can help me continue the conversation. Don't forget to check out over on Patreon. There's additional content coming up over there. I've got some fun knitting updates, just some cozy chill videos. I have another one coming soon about something I picked up at the thrift store. Check it out if you would like to see additional content from me and help support the channel here. It means a great deal. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.